Welcome to another episode of the 60 podcast. My name's Tom Campbell. Great to have your company. Week off, work gets in the way. Sometimes life gets in the way, but we're back this week. Seeves, I'm going to let you start off with where we start. So do you want to hit the good, the bad, or the ugly first?
Oh, mate, let's go. Let's start ugly. Let's go real ugly.
Let's start with the ugly. How can you go past the Gold Coast Titans? They would not beat Bluff Rabbitohs the way they're going. They are horrendous. And it makes you think, how did they get to this point? Because their roster is so terrible and they are not set up for any sort of success, whether it be long-term or short-term.
Well, mate, Holbrook didn't do a bad job with them last year until he was sacked. They were sitting on the fringe of the 8, if not 8th, I think, until he got the punt. So I'm not too sure. I did find it humorous, though, earlier on in the preseason when so-called experts were, jumping up and down saying how the Titans were going to be a top 8 side. In no world was that going to happen. Obviously, look, as we know, people in the media, they'll always over-exaggerate when one of their mates are involved, and Desi's mates with a lot of those blokes. But I think it tells me where the Cowboys are really at, more than the Titans improving last week, because I actually am not sold on the Cowboys one bit. I don't think they're that good. They leaked points, and the Titans were able to score points on them easy. And the Titans actually didn't look like scoring a try until that game. So, yeah, they're in trouble.
David Fifita has a player option in his favour for next year. You just couldn't possibly see him stay.
It all depends on what's on offer for him, I think. If he's got something that goes close to matching what he's on at the moment, I think he'll take it. Otherwise, I mean, at the end of the day, it's good money. It's a player option. He can just tick that box and go again. We forget he's so young, so he still has plenty of time to, jump on a club that's close to a premiership at some stage. I think, Pavita would be 23 still? Would that be about right?
Yeah, probably 23, 24.
Yeah, so he's got a lot of time. It wouldn't shock me if he ends up taking the option because, the money that he's on there is probably not going to get somewhere else. But it was good to see him actually roll the sleeves up and work his butt off last weekend. His work rate was through the roof. So, there goes the argument as well that do you really want him working his ass off and taking away from those explosive moments, or would you rather him pick and choose and have an explosive moment where he palms off 3 blokes, makes a break, or scores a try? So I think, it's what do you want out of him? But it was good to see that he can roll the sleeves up, and I think it might have been 19 or 20 hit-ups he had on the weekend. That's impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he found that happy medium last year when he was brought into the Origin team. I thought he did a phenomenal job playing State of Origin last year. So if he can find that happy medium, he should be a permanent stay in the Queensland team for a long while to come. We'll move on to the bad. Obviously, it's South Sydney. Can you pick a moment or a decision that they've made over the past sort of 12, 18 months that has led to this? Because the obvious one is the losing of Adam Reynolds. That's the one that you can circle. And it's particularly strange, Steves, when the reason that they didn't want to commit to him was age, clearly. Yet they've re-signed all these other guys up on multiple year deals who are not far off Adam, if not in Cody Walker's case, almost the same age.
Mate, I think it's more than one thing. It'd be too hard. Like, we could pinpoint one thing, or we could say one thing, but there's probably 5 one things. It is just, the recruitment and retention of players and staff not listening to Sam when he was, screaming from the rooftop last year that there was issues and someone need to listen and make some changes. Well, they didn't. The change they made was they got rid of him, and they got rid of Morris, and they're worse. They don't look like winning a game of footy. So, that's another one. Look, it's a case for Demetrio where for so long it was so clear that he craved this opportunity. He wanted it. He was happy to bag other people that were in the position that he wanted to get to. And sometimes it's a little bit harder than what it seems. And there's some decisions that he needed to make a long time ago, and he hasn't. And I'm not sure that Damien Cook being dropped is the decision that had to be made this weekend. Yeah, that certainly shows that there's a line in the sand, and they're prepared to drop anyone. But for mine, Cody Walker's been their worst player. I said it 2 weeks ago when we were on the pod, um, and again, maybe if Ilias wasn't injured, they might have been able to look at dropping Walker. But I suppose at the end of the day now, they drop Walker, they've got to move White into 6. Then they go back to Kenner in the centres, which it's not going to work. They're in all sorts.
There are 2 points I'd make about that. One is the signing of Jack Whiten, I thought was so bizarre. And I'm not saying Jack's not a good player.
They needed
Oh yeah. Yeah. And if you could say to South Sydney, hey, we'll take away Jack Whiten's deal, it never happened, and you get Adam Fanua-Blake for next year, what do you think they're going to do?
footballer, but Adam Fanua-Blake is clearly on the market. Cronola's picked him up for next year, and he's going to make them an even stronger side. I don't know why they didn't go for someone like Fanua-Blake. Again, they may have. We don't know. We're only speculating. Fanua-Blake might not want to go there. A lot of the times we do make opinions or have opinions or make statements based on what we assume, but really we don't know what happens behind closed door and what conversations were had. So they may have gone after Fanua-Blake. It's clear that they needed a prop or two. And Whiten, while he's an excellent player and they did need another outside back, all of their salary is tied up in 3 or 4 players. And it just seems that their whole roster's out of whack.
I remember having Peter Bedell on the show in one of the early episodes of the podcast. And it was around the time where South were in the grand final. It was Wayne's last game coaching the team. And obviously Jason was lined up to take over the keys to the kingdom for the next year. And we spoke about the pressure that was going to be on him because, he's inheriting a grand final winning team. Like, how often is it that a coach gets a team that is even top 8 worthy, let alone a grand final team? Usually they get them when they're in the bottom 4 because they've just been sacked. So the situation was highly rare for what Jason walked into. And clearly, whether it be decisions that he's made, whether it be standards that he's set or decisions by the board, that you can all trace it back to that point there because they had a little bit of a sugar hit over the first sort of year, but then clearly something's gone terribly wrong.
Mate, it's just following the pattern of Wayne Bennett teams when he leaves. So I don't care what anyone says. I'm not saying he's not a good coach. He's a great coach. He's one of the best 2 or 3 coaches that have ever coached in the sport. But it's now not a coincidence. Every single team that he leaves, the roster is in a way worse position within 12 to 18 months. So he coaches for the here and now. He coaches for that quick fix, that quick win. Sign certain people that are, aging, or he might not sign someone because he knows that in a couple of years it's going to come back to bite the club because there's a history of that happening a number of times as well. And Reynolds is obviously the most recent. And then things fall apart. So, yeah, of course, part of it is a little bit to do with the fact that one of the best coaches ever is leaving. You got to step into those shoes. But there are so many other factors that play into it. And it's claimed another one. You know what? I don't want any coach to go through what some of these guys go through because I know firsthand how it makes people feel and how their families feel when it happens to them. But I just can't see how Demetrio is in the role within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on that because we're at a stage now where it's a matter of when, not if, with Jason Demetrio. Reports come out today that they are lining up Mal to take over for the rest of the season. So the writing's on the wall here. Seibs, there was a point where your brother was at the Broncos and the same writing was on the wall at that point. What was it like for your whole family in that point, knowing that, hey, it's going to happen here? It's just a matter of time.
A little bit different in the fact that Anthony did fall on his own sword there. And no matter what, people say he wasn't pushed. It was just it got to the point where it was done. He couldn't continue on in the role. So a little bit different in that respect. But the pressure, the external pressure, the noise that happens around it, the social media stuff, the media stuff, and you got to remember too, the media has tamed a lot the last 12, 18 months. They're nowhere near as brutal and nasty as what they were a few years ago. So that side of it's a little bit different. But it's not nice. It isn't. It affects, it affects all of the family, and because you know that obviously it's someone that's close to you. You know, well, it's hurting them, so it hurts you. You know, and people will say, and there's been plenty of smartasses that have wanted to say to me, "Oh, well, they know what happens when you get into the job." It's like, yeah, well, it's high paid, it's high pressure, isn't it? So that's fine, but you don't go into any job expecting to cop abuse on social media or death threats and things like that. So people who want to argue that are just dickheads, and they'll get bit on the arse themselves one day. But mate, it sucks. So again, that's why I don't want it to happen to anyone. But reality is, when the whispers come out that there's one game to go, he's got 80 minutes. The report this afternoon that Mal Meninga's lined up ready to go. Well, win, lose or draw this week, he's gone. It's happening over the bye.
The key point as well, and this is where you can draw some similarities between Anthony's situation at the Broncos and JD's situation now. Two incredibly passionate fan bases. Like, these guys are just rabid.
Yeah, for sure, mate. And I think the Mal Meninga one is interesting because for me it screams that, righto, Mel's coming in, he's going to bring out the big stick, he's going to smash a couple of blokes with it. Because it's coming from Mel, it's not going to be taken anywhere near as bad as it would be if it was Ben Hornby coming in with a big stick. And some blokes are going to be told you're gone. Some blokes are going to be told you're playing in a certain position, whether you like it or not. Some blokes are going to get a big hug because they need a big hug and they need a little bit of loving to try and get some form back. And Mel will do that. I've got no doubt at all. And then it'll be interesting to see who comes in after it, whether they go back to Maguire, whether they go back to Bennett, I don't know, they might, or whether they just find someone to sit in the seat for 12 more months until they bring Sam back. But again, I think some other changes in the hierarchy before Sam would come back from what you hear.
I love the phrase you use there, that Mal's come in with a big stick, because that is exactly what he's doing. He is here to be a bit of a tornado and stir some shit up over the next few weeks and bump a few heads together and get a bit of a reaction out of these guys.
That's what it's safe to assume that's what's going to happen. If it doesn't, well, then I don't know what the point of bringing Mel in, because Mel hasn't coached in 1999.
You may as well go coach. That's the point.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. So you would assume that's what's going to happen, whether it does or not. I think it would, surely. Surely there's no other reason for him to come in and tell blokes a few and sit them down and get them to have a look in the mirror. I think with Latrell, that elbow to Sean Johnson on the weekend was a little bit of a wake up to yourself moment that he even had halfway through doing it. So I watched it a few times. You see his reaction as he did it. It was very much a, what the hell did I just do face? I don't know if you saw a couple of the angles that I'm talking about, but he even grabs him and you can see him mouth something along the lines of, "I'm sorry, Matt, I didn't mean it." Now, whether he meant it or not, it looks like he meant it to me. But I think he realised, hang on, I've crossed the line again here. Not only have I crossed the line, I've cheap-shotted arguably the most loved bloke in the comp, who has never done a dirty thing or a cheap thing to anyone ever in his 12 years of playing first grade. So, yeah, and if that wasn't a wake up to yourself moment, well, he's never going to have one.
No. Let's.
I like Latrell. I think he's good. There's no way on earth, if Latrell was at Para, speaking of bad and ugly, there is no way on earth I'd want to get rid of him. I'd want to try and get the best out of him. You don't want to lose him. He's too good. Walker, he's 35. He's not playing. Wouldn't worry me if he left. Damien Cook, Yeah, he's getting on. I'd want another year or two out of him, but again, it wouldn't worry me if he left. Latrell, you've got him. You got to keep him.
I want to ask you, if you're Russell Crowe, if you're the powers that be at South, and you are looking for this, you want South's best interest at heart. Who are you going for 2025 as your head coach?
It depends who's available.
Okay, so I'll
The
give you
blokes
three.
who are
I'll give you
currently
three.
available.
I'll give you three: Ben Hornby, Wayne Bennett, and Madge.
Well, they can't throw Hornby to the wolves. Um, he might be a great coach, but I just don't think they can throw another rookie coach in there at the moment. So it's either Madge or Bennett, and it's, do you want the circus that you get with Bennett again? And what happens after he leaves? Yep, I'm sure he will fix them immediately. They'll be better. But then what happens when he goes? So out of those options, I'd say Maguire.
I'm writing about this in the paper this week. For me, it is Wayne, purely based on the fact that these guys are under contract and they're aging. So you actually are forced into a period of, we have to try to win now. There's no rebuild here. We have to try to win with these guys that are under contract now. So to me, it is Wayne to try and get whatever juice he can get out of this team, because it seems like the only way to look at this situation is for over the next 2 years. Sorry, what was that?
The roster that they've got and the way that they've performed, do you really think that the roster that they've got and how they're playing at the moment, they're all going to be 12 months older. Do you really think that roster can win a comp next year?
Absolutely not. But they've got no choice. They've got no choice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh,
I think they're in for a rough
think,
stretch, no matter what.
Yeah. They go back to square one when he leaves again. If they go to one. That's my only argument. And it would make me physically ill. I'd really contemplate how I support the team. But Para's probably the better fit for Bennett, because Para's got a better roster and they're closer to being ready than what South are. I don't want it to happen. I'm saying that right now. But as far as, where I see him more likely to go, and again, that Brad Arthur's, he's probably fine. I mean, they'll give him another year or so. I would have thought he's earned that right. But yeah, that would be more likely for mine, that he'd look at somewhere like that, because again, he's getting older. He hasn't won anything for a while. He wants to win. He wants a quick fit. He wants another premiership. He would. Yeah.
And we'll move on to the good over the weekend. And I tell you what, after the performance last week by Manly, where they could not have played any worse if they tried, Tom Trbojevic dropped about 19 footballs, and the rest of them didn't do any better in a terrible loss to the Dragons. And I think that at the end of the year, that's one game that they'll circle and be like, what the fuck were we doing that day? They go out and beat Penrith.
It is bizarre, isn't it, mate? Like, what's the old saying? Styles, mate. It's a ridiculous stat, like something like 8 or 9 years that Manly haven't been able to beat the Dragons at Wollongong. There's records like that go back through the decades of footy, just for whatever reason. Like, Brisbane can't beat Melbourne. The other day they just couldn't get the job. They should have won. They just couldn't get the job done. Remember, for years and years, for whatever reason, the Dragons couldn't beat the Raiders, and it was all of those golden point, last second, dramatic finishes. There's just always these strange little anomalies, and for whatever reason, Manly at Wollongong's one of them. It's like they shit the bed when they get there. But they were unreal against Penrith. They did to Penrith what Penrith do to other teams, and they attacked them with their defence.
One thing I want to highlight about Manly's performance against Penrith, we spoke to your brother about this when we had him on the show, when we were doing the Manly review from last year. The game last year that I thought gave me a lot of optimism for Manly heading into this year was the game against Penrith. They had a lot of people out, and it was the game, if people remember, I think that they lost 20-10, and Liam Martin scored that try where it was a blatant knock on. Now, in that game, Manly threw so much at them that was totally out of the ordinary. They were kicking on tackle one. They were spreading the ball in their own 20. They were doing so many things that you just wouldn't expect. Usually you go, oh, okay, we're versus Penrith, keep the ball secure, we're going to hit it up, and then we're just going to play possession game, try and get somewhere, try and see if we can make a break somewhere. They threw everything at them. And with the squad that they had to only lose 20-10, I found it so encouraging for this season. And people like Nathan Brown have come in and just made a phenomenal difference to that team. I'm so excited, and I can't believe that the words are coming out of my mouth for someone who bagged him for so long. I cannot wait until Matt Lodge comes back into this team. I think he's going to provide so much for them and just add a whole new dimension to their forward pack.
I agree, man. I think he'll add plenty. He's aggressive. He's got good go forward. He's a leader. But then they've got Saab to come back in, and obviously Garrick's missing this week as well. There is a big difference between the guys that have been playing on the wing and Jason Saab. He's got X factor. He's got speed where half a break becomes a try because he's that quick. So there's definitely a lot of upside there, and I think consistency is the key for them now. It's they certainly look a more consistent side this year, and they're a much better team than what they were last year. Even though I thought they weren't too bad at times last year either. But it's going to be a big test in New Zealand against the Warriors. The Warriors are flying at the moment, so it'd be a good test. I don't necessarily. Well, if it was me, I wouldn't be looking. Obviously they want to go there and get the win, but I think they're going to be looking at, can they go to New Zealand and test, the team that are dead set the favourites to push, in my opinion, the favourites to push Penrith for the comp this year. So if they can make life hard for them and then put themselves in a position to win the game, well, I'm sure they'll walk away happy and with more confidence, because then they've got a good little run coming up as well.
What is your point of view on the Schuster situation?
First one is, don't believe everything you read. So whether it's about how much he's on or whether he's on the outer or not on the outer. So, straight away, the how much is he on? Well, what's reported, it might be what's reported under the salary cap, but it's certainly, that's what he could earn, put it that way. So, that's one thing. I reckon Felipe Mateo I had a soft spot for him being an Eel. There's a lot of Felipe Mateo about Schuster. Both of them are frustrating. Both of them have got more skills than anyone on the field. Both of them at times don't really try too hard. And then all of a sudden they have a 10-minute block where they can win a game on their own. I get why they would persist with him and why they're trying to get something out of him, because I think everyone can see the talent that's there. But at the end of the day, they're going to give him however many chances they're going to give him. They've obviously challenged him by putting him in reserve grade. He might not be doing what they want to see out of him in reserve grade. So it's up to him now. If he rips in and does what's asked of him, he'll play NRL at Manly. If he doesn't, well, I reckon they'll move him on. But I get why they've taken the risk with him. It makes sense.
To me, the biggest development in the Schuster situation is the consistency that Ben Trbojevic is bringing.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're Anthony, there's no way you could sacrifice what Ben is bringing you every week for the potential of Josh Schuster right now.
Look, Trbojevic, I think, again, he's another boy that we all forgot how young he is. He looks more like a man now, doesn't he? Like, he's physically mature and he looks stronger, he looks faster. He's more confident because he's 22, so he's not a kid anymore. And you look at it, and as a coach, do I want someone who's 7 out of 10 every week? 6.5's his worst, 7.5's his best. You know exactly what you're going to get out of him, defensively sound. Or do you want the bloke that could be a 2 out of 10 or it could be a 10 out of 10? You don't know what you're going to get. The weeks he's a 10 out of 10, he's got all 6 daily end points. He even gets Nico Heinz's. And the weeks he's bad, well, you wouldn't feed him. So I know what I would do. I want the consistent bloke, who's not going to let you down. You know what you're going to get out of him.
And not only that, it's a totally different style if Schuster was to play than Ben.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Schuster's someone that
I,
relies on early ball.
yeah, I'd use Schuster if I was going to play him in first grade. I'd play him at lock. So when one of the middles comes off, that little bit of point of difference, Jake pushes it up to prop. He jumps in. He's a link man between Brooks and Cherry Evans, or can have the middle forwards pushing up into space off him. You know, that's what I would do with him. But um, yeah, again, he's obviously got to get a lot fitter, and his work rate's got to improve if he's going to do that.
What are you most looking forward to this weekend?
Well, I'm interested to see the Dolphins Broncos game. I really am. I think it's going to be a toss of the coin. Both, the Broncos are struggling at the moment. They got a few guys out. If they lose, they're 2 from 6. It's hard to come back from 2 from 6, no matter how good you are. We saw it last year with a couple of teams: Cowboys, Para, Roosters. Roosters were, the fortunate team that just did enough to come back. But certainly, you're setting yourself up for a tough season if you're 2 from 6. Alternatively, Dolphins have got deja vu. They're back where they were at the same time last year. They win again. I think they were 5 from 7 last year, which, they're on track to be something very similar. Can they get there? And what have they learned from last year? So I think I'm really looking forward to that game. And again, I'm looking forward to see what Sharks and Rabbits dishes up. It could be South could come out and absolutely test strips off the Sharks in the first 10, 15 minutes. And then you never know what could happen. If they're coming off the back fence and they're ripping in and playing for their life, well, it's a great game. Alternatively, Sharks could win by 40.
Could be rubbish.
It sniffs Nico Hines. Yeah, new one. That's what it's saying. That's the I'm getting. But I'm looking forward to see it because either way, it's going to be dramatic. Something's happening. What about you?
For me, it's Parramatta and Cowboys. Parramatta need to find a way to keep some wins on the board while Mitch Moses is out. They get back to Combank in an afternoon game, perfect conditions.
They need to modify. They can't keep playing the way that they played with Mitchell Moses because I think even the Mitchell Moses haters now can see that actually he is one of the best 4 or 5 halves in the comp, and he's so important to that Parramatta team, and they can't play the style of footy without him. So they need to adapt and adjust how they're playing. Get a couple of wins up, he comes back, they're alive. Keep playing like they've played against the Raiders, and they're in big trouble.
Have to find a way to win this weekend, and they get a pretty good chance to bounce back this weekend.
They're 2 from 6 if they lose this week. I just think it's lucky they're playing the Cowboys because the Cowboys are allergic to defending.
Yes, might be some points in the game. This has been another episode of the 60 Yard Podcast, and that is full time.